generosity and your thoughtfulness in extending me the privilege of visiting with you this evening. I really wanted to focus on a theme that I emphasized 2 years ago that I don't think is lost on anyone in this room, and that is experience matters. And when it comes to leadership, experience matters in a significant way. So I'm gonna rifle through. I thought I had like 15 minutes, but I'm gonna.
We'll give you a little bit of leeway.
Okay.
Roughly 10 minutes. Do the best you can.
So one thing that I want to clarify, I'm not a stranger to Capuchin Parish. I have been in this community, visiting this community, family members in this community since I was a small child. My great uncles, who were ministers, were the Quincy, they were Gillespie's, and I have an uncle who lives here also, Don Berry. He's also a clergyman. So I'm very proud of my Louisiana roots. I'm extremely proud of, as we say in Florida, my roots. So my maternal grandparents and my mother originated in Rapides Parish, Alexandria and Pineville. My paternal grandparents and my father in Natchitoches Parish. I've had a hard time convincing people in Texas that it's not Natchitoches. And so you can see I'm sort of vastly familiar with it. But I have family in Arroyo Parish, Capuchin Parish, Lafayette Parish, Natchitoches Parish, Orleans Parish, Red River Parish, and what's important to me today is an ability to do what I call coming home. Most of my family remain in Louisiana, and for a reason that defies me to this very day, my parents opted to move to Port Arthur, Texas. So I still consider Louisiana home, and that is a very strong emphasis on why I have been reaching out to try to acquire this position. About me very quickly, born and raised in Port Arthur, Texas, a little over 1 hour away. I'm the second of 12 siblings. As I mentioned a moment ago, born to Louisiana natives. After high school, I didn't have any idea of what it was I wanted to do, so I did the most natural thing for a person in Port Arthur who didn't have formal skills. I became a longshoreman, and I loaded ships for a little while, and it finally dawned on me after a year or so that I don't think this is what God had in mind for me to do. And I became a refinery laborer at the Texas Refinery in Port Arthur. My wife, Dr. Leola Lawrence, is a former Houston principal, and we're parents of 3 sons and 3 daughters. Away from the office is family first. That's an emphasis of mine, always has been throughout my career. And next to that, my church commitments. I'm a teacher. I've taught Sunday school for over 30 years wherever I've lived. I'm co-director of Vacation Bible School along with my wife. And I'm very involved in prison ministry. I have been for some years now. I was mentored to school leadership by my late uncle. And so this is my uncle to the left, the guy who's grinning. When I appeared before you 2 years ago, he had just passed away about a week or so earlier. And Uncle Kernan was the first superintendent of schools of color of the St. Paul, Minnesota public school system, and was the superintendent there from 1991 to 1997. My cousins on the right, he's on the left, my cousins on the right side are Luttrell and Pearl Payne. Pearl's my dad's first cousin. When my father was orphaned at 3 months old, Pearl's family, his dad's sister, took my dad in and helped to raise him. The School of Education at LSU, about 2 months ago, was formally renamed the Luttrell and Pearl Payne School of Education, after Luttrell and Pearl. Luttrell, in fact, was the first African American to gain admission to LSU in 1950. Of course, he had to go through a lawsuit to gain admission. And his wife, Pearl, was the first woman of color to graduate with a master's degree from LSU in 1956, the year I was born. So I do have some background and a lot of influence. When I told Uncle Kermit that I wanted to be a superintendent, the first thing he told me was, prepare to move. Superintendents don't simply drop out of the sky into your lap. Superintendents have to go to where the work is. I've done that my entire career. I told you he's a native of Rapides Parish, and he was superintendent in St. Paul, Minnesota. Very quickly, my formal educational preparation. I never intended to be an educator. In fact, I prepared to be a writer. I thought that was my strong suit and what I wanted to do in life. So I pursued an undergraduate degree in English, a master's of education in educational administration at the University of Texas at Austin, and my doctoral degree at the University of Texas at Austin in their superintendent's program. So the cooperative superintendent's program, at the time that I gained admission in 1989, was the #1 ranked superintendent preparation program in the country. And I wanted to be a part of that experience so badly that I competed to gain admission. It was highly competitive. You didn't simply apply and got in. You had to go through a very rigorous assessment center, and I was fortunate enough to be selected. That was a 3.5-hour drive from Dallas. So I relocated to Austin, Texas, to be a part of the best superintendent preparation program in the country. Google it. Please don't accept what I'm sharing with you. But the program is very highly regarded. I graduated from the Executive Leadership Institute for the community college leadership. I actually wanted to look into community college leadership because of strong linkage between, I think, public schools and community colleges. I view community colleges as a natural pathway for students who are struggling and students with limited means to take the next step forward in their formal education. And I'm also a graduate, most recently, a year ago, of the Holsworth District Leadership Experience at the Center at Lake Austin. I received a recognition as a stellar performer in education during my superintendent experience in St. Louis, Missouri, from the St. Louis American Foundation. So, in terms of my professional experiences, I have 7 years of experience as a school superintendent. I have also served as an assistant superintendent in large urban districts, San Antonio, 50,000 students, 99 campuses. I served on both the instructional side of the house as assistant superintendent of elementary schools, 30 campuses reported to me. And I also served as the assistant superintendent of administration. So I oversaw later the operational side of the house. So I have experience in large systems on both sides of the organization. At the Texas Education Agency, I served as the senior executive director, the inaugural senior executive director of district effectiveness and compliance. I'll say a little bit more about that. I was an elementary, high school, and alternative high school principal in my career. High school teacher, English and speech, college writing instructor, university adjunct lecturer and professor. I'm gonna really move past this. I shared it before. Everyone understands we're rebounding from what is arguably the most tumultuous period in the history of American education. We have not yet rebounded from COVID. COVID is still very much impacted what I call, most folks refer to it as lost learning. I think the more accurate description is unfinished learning. It's learning that is yet to take place. Lost learning suggests that they learned it and lost it. I think unfinished learning is a more apt description for the process that we described here. CPSB, the hurricane water damage. One thing about Calcasieu Parish and Lake Charles that is very similar to my hometown, both places are hurricane magnets. They are. My earliest memory, and this is no exaggeration, my earliest fuzzy memory is being at a school, I don't know where in Louisiana we were, but we were actually evacuated from a hurricane. I remember we were at a campus in the cafeteria with blankets on the floor and trying to just get away from a storm. And so that's been a way of life, and I haven't had to deal with it except maybe 24 hours ago. Had to deal with the same thing. So I'm going to go back to my theme that I think is so profound, and it's one that I hope resonates with this group this evening, and that is that experience matters. whether they're going to consider leadership from the outside as opposed to leadership that's internal. It's about experience over familiarity. And I get that, I totally get that. We know these guys, they've worked their entire career. We've watched them gradually ascend the ladder from teachers to principals to central office. We trust these guys, and we don't know what an external person will bring. I'm hoping that perhaps the second time may be the charm. The other part of the equation that I think is equally important is the knowledge level. As you consider each of the other four candidates, they are extremely knowledgeable young men, extremely capable leaders, leaders who can do the job if they were given a fair shake by being gradually placed in that opportunity. The only thing I have beyond the other four candidates is experience. And I submit to you this evening that experience is the thing that connects the dots. If you want the dots to be connected, there has to be experience. It takes me back to when I first became a principal. I'd only been an assistant principal for 6 months. And Dallas thought that I was ready to be a principal. I sat in that seat on day one and scratched my head for about 10 minutes. And what helped me was I learned to rely upon seasoned veteran principals who had already done that work, who could help to sort of orient me and help me to gain a footing to become a solid school leader. But where is the responsibility for preparing leaders to succeed? Where does that responsibility belong? Where does it lie? I submit that responsibility lies with the school board and the school district to prepare leaders to succeed. Very quickly, this leader, you may not know, this gentleman was born in Mexico. At 6 years of age, his parents and the family moved to Chicago. He did not speak a word of English. He still had a strong Mexican accent from old Mexico, that accent today. Here's what he and I share in common. He's the eldest of 12. I'm the second of 12. We both love kids and teachers. We both have strong native accents. My native accent is not as apparent here as it is when I'm in New York. And people ask me, am I from the Bahamas? And I tell them, no, I'm not. But he's also deeply just, you will not find a more humble guy. This guy was fired from the job that he had before he became superintendent of San Antonio in Reno, Nevada. He was fired from that job, and he was hired in San Antonio. Like myself, he has a laser focus on data and metrics. You'll notice that I'm a data-driven person. He was able to take the San Antonio school system, 50,000 kids, from a F accountability rating to a B accountability rating in 7 years. And he did it because he had a business approach to district improvement, the same approach that I have. I was blessed to work with him in San Antonio the years that I was there. He is now the chief executive officer of the Chicago Public Schools in Chicago, Illinois. His name is Pedro Martinez. I believe we should use data as a flashlight. School systems historically and state boards of education historically have used data as a hammer to punish, to label, and to cause condescension, to create, and I'm not a fan of, to be very honest, of the Texas accountability system. That's why I don't pursue superintendency there. This is the only superintendency I have intentionally pursued in the last couple of years for a very good reason. And I'm going to mention that. So I don't have time. Where am I on time?
Couple minutes, wrap it up.
Okay, so I don't have time to dig into I have 4 points here, the 4 major points of the CPBS strategic plan. I won't dig into it here. I will say that this district is strategically positioned to go very far, very fast. I think you have to go slow before you can go fast. With the right, I think, leadership and the right support, the district can move forward. As I prepared for Calcasieu Parish School Board, these are the things I did. I intentionally selected the best superintendent preparation program in the country. I went to great pains to become a part of that program and to graduate. I intentionally selected to lead the most impoverished campuses in both Dallas and Houston, and in fact asked the superintendent for an opportunity to lead campuses in the most crime-ridden, drug-infested communities in both of those large urban districts, because I felt that my background aligned very well with what was going on in the community, and those were places where leadership tried to get away from, not go to. And lastly, I will offer that at the Texas Education Agency, I acquired skills that allowed me to be able to assess school districts, to be able to discern the factors that were inhibiting progress, and I was also able to learn to generate findings and recommendations for improvement in student performance and progress at the Texas Education Agency. My last experience there, I actually designed a process that was used for monitoring state and federal programs called District Effectiveness and Compliance. And of course, I oversaw that program for all 1,040 school systems in Texas in the late 90s. I won't go into the priorities. I will say this: my entry plan consists of a 60-day looking, listening, and learning tour with guidance from the school board. To meet with students, district staff, teachers, parents, and community members to hear their voices, understand their concerns, and to hear their reflections upon expectations for the leadership of CPSB. I plan to, of course, visit all campuses, meet with campus teams, including teachers and staff, leadership teams, engage in team building and trust building sessions with the superintendent's leadership team, but most importantly, to establish a bond with the school board to become the foundation for the work that we will do forward doing. Lastly, I will engage in an environmental scan, which would allow me to grasp the current state of the district, to begin leading with deep insight and understanding. And in a nutshell, to wrap up, here's what I offer. I offer experience, and I don't think that can be overstated. 7 years as a superintendent, urban, middle-sized, and smaller districts, 4 years as an operational assistant superintendent in a district serving 24 campuses. I did that because I never wanted it to be said that I only worked in large urban districts. And if you look at the district where I've worked, I intentionally pivoted from struggling campuses and struggling school districts to districts and campuses that were performing very well in the last several years of my career. 7 years with the Texas Education Agency, but the 9 years that I think any principal can identify with, serving as principals in several schools. So that's basically what I have. I think if you have skills, you should be willing to travel. And if you look at the nature of the superintendency in this country, superintendents go to where the work is. They don't expect the work to come to them. That is, in essence, what I have. Thank you for allowing me to share.
Thank you, Dr. Lawrence. Now we're going to start hitting you with some questions. If you're prepared, we're going to start down there with Ms. Ayo. We'll come this way.
Dr. Lawrence, have you researched our parish?
Oh yes, absolutely I have.
Can you tell me what that research looked like?
What the research looks like?
Yeah, like, did you go into the public? Who have you been asking questions? Where have you learned about our parish?
So, what I've heard from, and I've spoken to lots of people in different areas of the district, is that the district is doing well, but there seems to be a push, or at least a sentiment that I was able to discern among many of the folks that I expressed, that they're looking for a different type of leadership, that they prefer to have an opportunity for leadership, maybe external, coming to the district, that the district had of these different municipalities. I might mention that as superintendent, in St. Louis, I had 24 municipalities within the geographic boundaries of my school district. The research, shows that the district is doing well financially. I think it's something to be proud of. The school system is making great progress, and that's kudos to the staff that's currently here.
Mr. Van?
Yes, sir. And this actually just got sent to me. I just want to give you, and I think it was earlier in your career, but it's a newspaper article or St. Louis Public Radio about, Normandy schools losing their accreditation. Can you?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that question, very good question. So, when I reported to the Normandy School District, I mentioned that I always intentionally pursued campuses and districts that were really on their last leg. So, when I reported to the Normandy School District, it had been provisionally accredited for 15 years. It was 3 years away from losing its accreditation. That's what really appealed to me, and that's why I went to Normandy. So we were able to turn some things around, and within 2 years, I received the stellar performance education because all of the data was pointing in the right direction. I will confess that I brought in a lot of new leadership at the campus level, and that made a tremendous difference. What caused the district to lose its accreditation, and this has never happened anywhere else in the country. If you get a chance, Google this, how Missouri killed the Normandy School District. Google that article. Nowhere else in the country have the two lowest performing districts in the state been merged together, ever, except this one instance. If you look at Dallas, when the Wilmer Hutton School District was closed, it was folded to Dallas. A high-performing, large district that was fiscally sound. More recently, the North Forest School District was folded to Houston ISD. Same scenario. Houston at that time was the best performing urban school district in the country. They received the Broad Prize. However, for some reason, the Commission of Education in the state of Missouri thought it made perfect sense to take the lowest two performing districts in the state, the Wellston School District, which was the only one performing under Normandy, and merge those two districts as a formula for success. The public was furious, and you can imagine what the school board said. I will be very honest. My position was this: we do not have the luxury to turn these kids away. We don't. I know it sounds unfair. Of course, they felt it was going to pull the district down, which it did. But I've always given credit for that to the only board of education in the history of this country that thought merging the lower two districts with. I felt like, as I expressed in the article that Diane Ravitch published, that it was going to turn out disastrous from the outset. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, sir, I think so. Like I said, I just want to give you.
Oh, yeah, I'm glad you need it.
So were you able to get it reaccredited or?
No, well, so here's what I did. This is something that I learned in superintendent school, and I think it's the same thing I can give you this guarantee tonight. To me, when the district's accreditation was taken a year after the district was merged into our district, I felt like it was best for the district to have new leadership. My board vehemently disagreed and said, we really need you to stay and see us through this period. I felt like at that point in time that the school district needed a new face, a fresh face to come in, take the reins, because fair or unfair, I would always be associated with what? The loss of accreditation. Even though, and this has been studied in universities across the country, because again, don't take this from me, research it, Google it. Never before in the history of this country has any state board of education merged the two lowest performing, the two districts with the highest percentage of African American students and the highest percentage of impoverished students in the state, and merged them as a formula for success. And if you all think that was a good idea, you all may know something I don't.
Ms. McReynolds?
Mr. Lawrence, I want to tell you, it takes a lot to apply the second time for a superintendent doing that. And also, as you're aware of, Texas teachers get paid more than Louisiana. Have you looked into Calcasieu Parish budget? And if so, what are some ways within if you're selected, what are some ways would you help for, increase the teacher pay?
So one of the frames that I skipped over and I really regretted at this moment addressed the same exact thing. Many school districts that are struggling fiscally, and most districts in Texas, I'm sure you're aware, are really struggling mightily when it comes to budgets and finances. I think stipends are wonderful. If you place a stipend against no increase at all, the stipend wins hands down. What's preferable and what teachers would prefer is what's known as a pay increase, where that pay improvement is folded into their pay ladder, and this becomes a regular increment. We would have to find ways, first of all, and I think a part of the issue of why we are struggling to pay teachers is because we're first of all struggling to find teachers. I'm certain the same thing is taking place here, that teacher workforce is starting to disappear, and when we have to try to fill those vacancies, we've been forced to lean toward teachers who don't have the experience or the wherewithal to perform at a high level. And so I think one resource that's available that is rarely explored, I don't know to the extent that it's available here in Calcasieu Parish, is called a voter-approved tax incentive. It's actually money that is voted on almost like a school bond, and it raises the tax base just a little bit, not a lot. That's what some districts are doing right now to be able to pay teachers. In Victoria, we've done just that. But that's one of the things that would be at the top of my agenda, and that's an excellent question. But absolutely, we need to find ways to pay our teachers, not only to make them know they're appreciated, but also to let them know that we value them and we understand the challenges that they come up against every day in the classroom. Teaching today is not the same job that it was when I taught in 1985. It's a very different job and a lot more challenging. Thank you.
Ms. Bono?
Dr. Lawrence, is this on? Karen keeps cutting you off. Wait, Dr. Lawrence, I have a question about struggling schools. If the schools are struggling, like some of the schools we have here in this parish, what do you think would be the solution to bring these schools up to standard?
And that's an excellent question. There's no easy answer. I think one of the most important things that has to take place if leadership is very serious about improving student performance is to make certain that we equip every teacher with the resources that he or she needs to be able to do an acceptable job in the workplace. I think we also have to be invested also into looking at data, looking at curriculum-based assessments, looking at not only the formative, the summative assessments, looking at the PLCs and the professional learning community, and be very committed, be religiously committed almost, if I may, to making that happen in the school system. I think principals don't deliver an inferior product because that's what they wanted, but teachers underperform because that's their goal. Whenever a professional fails to perform at the level that we expect of them, most often it's because they lack the resources and support they need to do a credible job. And to the extent that we can support them, we should. However, we will find instances in which teachers lack the wherewithal, but they don't have the skills, but they're struggling. So we owe them, like we owe anyone else, an opportunity to build them up, to invest in them, provide them the professional training they need so that they can deliver at a high standard. But to answer your question, there really is no easy answer. There's been a lot of speculation, there's a lot of research out there, some of which is very compelling about what needs to be done to improve schools.
Mr. Brown?
First of all, like Mr. McReynolds said, I'm glad to see you throw your name in the hat. I think you did very well. That is something you're doing well.
Thank you. not only at the central office level, but at the campus level. And these pipelines have been explored and discussed, ad nauseum across the country for some time now. Those pipelines should be constructed in such a way that anyone aspiring to step into leadership roles would be given the opportunity. And not only would they be given the opportunity, they would be given the investment and support of training, what we call at-bats, so they can get out of swing and learn how to hit the ball. We have to invest heavily in making certain that not only is there a pipeline in place, but it's a solid pipeline that is supported by what we call vacancy planning. If you look at any campus and you look at the rate of teacher attrition, and that's how many teachers do they lose per year, and you can apply the same concept also to principals and assistant principals. You can anticipate, not accurately, but at least you'll have some idea that this campus loses teachers at this type of rate. The district would have to actually construct an infrastructure that would allow us to support finding new teachers, bringing new teachers in. What I'm seeing in other places, and I've heard people scream foul about it, is taking paraprofessionals and equipping them to become teachers. We're doing that normally right now. And for the lack of a better, option, that's what they have. But of course, some of those folks who are coming from being paraprofessionals and stepping into the classroom, they're being paid at a 0.75 teacher rate. The other 20.25 goes toward paying their training and get the university hours they need to become certified. But some of them don't have the wherewithal to perform well, and they're struggling. And so when parents see and community members see a diminishing of the performance, and it's these teachers, folks are very critical. But trying to find a way to build that teacher pipeline is not an easy thing to do. In fact, it's quite challenging. And likewise with leadership. Folks should be right now in a pipeline to become superintendents in this school system. And there's a way to do that. And I'm going beyond what you're asking your question too. I apologize.
No problem. I'm good.
Sorry. Mr. Natale?
Thank you, Dr. Lord. I was gonna ask you about employee retention and incentivizing new hires, but that's already been addressed. So I would just ask you to drill down a little bit while I was looking at the deepening our strategic planning points. So can you tell me a little bit more about the investment in the multi-tier system? Identifying behavioral issues and so forth also.
That is such a good question. I'm sorry that I was pressed for time and kind of went past that.
You got some time now?
Okay, I really appreciate that. So, I'm making an assumption that I think is fairly on point, and that is we've seen an uptick in the severity of student misbehavior at really low grades. We've seen that all over Texas. I'm sure the same thing is taking place here. Those students whose behavior several years ago we'd see one or two in the school, now we're seeing several in each grade level in the school. And these students are turning over desks and tearing up computers, and we don't have that here. So.
All kids are all great here, right?
Yeah, so a multi-tiered system of support is the same thing we did with RTI on the academic side of the house, except it's more on the emotional side of the house, is that we have to try to identify some resources and supports that apply to all students at the fundamental basic level. All students get these resources and supports. If we see evidence of a student struggling emotionally, anxiety, and so forth and so on, let's make sure that the foundational level, we apply these resources for all students. At the next level, where students are acting up a bit more, but they're not yet at the significant or the serious level, that next level of support applies more resources and support. And at the top level are those students that are destroying classrooms, assaulting teachers, and they're just uncontrollable. Those students deserve the type of mental health support that will help address their problems. Some of those problems, some of which are home-based problems that don't start at school, but but we have an opportunity with a multi-tiered system of support to construct a base of resources that will support teachers, but more importantly, support students with those exceptional challenges, behavioral challenges. And that's been where I've focused a lot of my work over the years, is in student behavior and discipline management. And I consider myself somewhat of a specialist in that area. Thanks for your question.
Reverend Wells?
All right, good evening, Dr. Lawrence. My question was going to be regarding the underperforming schools, but I do have another one that was already asked. And so on page number 8 in the packet you passed out, it has the strength builders. And I think that bullet point, the third one under trust with community, it states that CPSB must engage with community partners to help establish relationships with our families and communities. And so my question is regarding that, what strategies would you use to build strong relationships with local businesses, community organizations, and higher education institutions?
So, and thank you, that's an excellent question, by the way. In a previous life, when I was a high school principal, I was principal of the most challenged campus in the Houston school system. And the campus was referred to as Gangbangerville. It had a lot of gang involvement. It had the highest percentage of young mothers who were pregnant parents, students, so forth and so on. But we did what I call a SWOT analysis. I looked at all the types of symptoms, if you will, that were manifesting. And for each of those symptoms, whether we're talking about student illiteracy, students not being able to read and write on grade level, we would actually try to create what we said is going to be a cure or a resource to address it. Now, those, they really traveled across several areas, but the biggest part of it was trying to get the community and businesses involved. So when we were able to create the vision of the safety net at Cashmere High School in Houston, it became the first full-service community school in the Houston area. And we were able to enlist Texaco Chevron to come in and provide us $1.5 million in funding to help make that a reality. We got Harris County Hospital District, LBJ Hospital, to help us construct a state-of-the-art daycare system that allowed those students who were parents to bring their babies and drop them off, go to class, come back at lunch, and spend time. We also had a state-of-the-art computer center that enabled parents in the community to be able to come in, look for jobs, develop resumes, and we had a person on site through that $1.5 million in funding. What Texaco Chevron wanted to do, they said, we love your vision, we think it's outstanding, but you need to run the school. So we're gonna hire a full-time facilitator who's gonna help to run with the safety net. Safety net stood for Student Family Efforts Targeting Youth, a collaborative network. And so that was a process that the school board in St. Louis saw. And when I came to interview one board member, I'll never forget her name, Nancy Hartman, said, we want you to do the same thing you did at Cashmere with this entire school district. And guess what? We did that. We built the 24-1 community initiative plan, 24 municipalities, one school district, because the communities had been fighting, battling for years. I mean, it was paralyzing. And we were able to, within 6 months, meet with each of those mayors and the directors of the smaller municipalities, and to get them to understand that we understand you're gonna have disagreements, but no one has the luxury of being able to pick up your community and move it outside the school district. You are place-bound. And so we need to get on one accord. We need to make up our minds we're gonna work together as a team for the development of this school district and this community. And safety net, not safety net, that was 24-1. The 24-1 initiative community plan was such a success that we were invited to the White House to meet with 5 federal departments to share with them how we were able to develop that vision for success.
Mr. Castillo?
Yeah, Dr. Ward. Can you describe your decision-making process of it? Sorry about that. Can you describe your decision-making process that you would use as a superintendent?
Regarding anything particular community in a
In
general
general,
sense.
yes, sir, in general.
So, my current secretary teases me and often tells me, do you know what your superpower is? Overthinking. And so, I tend to invest heavily into trying to analyze at a micro level what is contributing to any type of challenge, whether it's at a campus, whether it's at central office, whether it's at the district level, for that to be the foundation of making a decision. So I don't make decisions easily. I also tend to involve others who are impacted by the decision in the decision making. Let them have a voice, let them be heard. I try my utmost to never be viewed as a micromanager, and I think some folks have said, you let all of your directors, you let the other assistant superintendents do it. Well, you know your job, you know what you were hired to do. And so I'm a person who engages in what I call planned decision-making and shared decision-making, collaborative decision-making, if I may. Because to hoist all those responsibilities upon my shoulders and to simply make a decision about what will or will not be is something that I feel has to be done very infrequently. And as frequently as possible, you'll notice that I will, as superintendent of schools, if I were selected, lean heavily toward this body to make certain that I am moving in the direction that you all see, that the goals that we have in place reflect what your thoughts are about how schools should be run. And so I value myself. My last role at the State Education Agency in Texas, I was director of site-based decision-making and planning. When the state moved in the direction of requiring all campuses throughout the state of Texas and all districts to engage in a site-based decision-making process that involved all stakeholders. And I remember when I first heard it, how opposed I was, because I was a dinosaur principal, and I felt back then, I'm not making decisions. But I've been changing my way of thinking because I believe that the more people involved in the decision, the more people feel inclined to embrace the decision and to be a part of it. If that makes sense.
Mr. Roberts. Oh, sorry. Mr. Roberts.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Lawrence. After your opening, I would suspect your closing will be focused on experience matters. I think that's the take home you want from us. But you also talked about the pipeline of maybe building superintendents in a school system. I'd like to, and we can look at your resume and see that ourselves, but I'd like you to talk about your pipeline and the opportunities you were given for your first year of being a superintendent in your first school district. You didn't have any experience at that time. What steps, how did you proceed to that, and why did they hire you?
Well, I think, so that was a very unique situation in that I actually was assigned to that school system by the Commission of Education because the state had taken the system over. The system was struggling and doing really badly. And so I worked for 2 years, and in my role as the manager of that district, I had authority over the board and the superintendent. I could turn around any decisions that were board members didn't really care for me very much at that time, because if I felt a decision was not in the best interest of all students, I would probably turn that decision around. And later, when I became superintendent there, it was the oddest thing. I was at my desk at the Texas Education Agency in Austin, and someone from Dallas called and told me, "Oh, you're a finalist for this school district in Dallas." I said, "Well, no, I'm not. I didn't apply. How could I possibly be a finalist?" Called the board president, "Why is my name in the Dallas Morning News as a finalist for your school system? Or we're drafting you." Well, I already know you. Why would I want to work for you? No, I didn't say that. But truth be told, so I started out in a very different role and wound up being superintendent there for 2 years. A district that struggled quite a bit. But to get back to your question, I lean so heavily on other superintendents who were seasoned veterans, but the other advantage I had that very few superintendents had coming into that first year of superintendency. I had worked at the State Education Agency with districts all over the state. Everyone in the state of Texas, most of the superintendents knew me. They knew I was administrator address this. When I left my last superintendency, I was superintendent 5 years in St. Louis. I made an intentional decision to go back and to painstakingly construct and gain all of the insight I could about all of the foundational experiences that superintendents need to become superintendents. So that once I became superintendent again, I would be over-prepared. That was very important to me. And not to be self-serving, but if you would have selected me as superintendent, you have a better prepared superintendent than I was in my last superintendency, and I think I did a decent job. But thank you, great question.
Dr. Washington.
Excuse me. Good evening, Dr. Lawrence. I want to share that I too wanted to work in East St. Louis after I graduated. I thought that would be the ultimate job to work with those companies. East Boogie, yes. I have a question related to your packet. On page 10, you talked about your 60-day looking, listening, and learning tour. It's still starting in only a few weeks, and decisions need to be made, and I'm assuming you may have to give notice. How will you prioritize what needs to be done and when?
Well, I try my darndest not to ever make assumptions, because everyone sitting in front of me understands what happens when you make assumptions. Hopefully, decisions are being made and resources put in place to open school in a way that's going to be orderly, in a way that's going to enable parents to drop their kids off and teachers to feel empowered to teach at a high level. But you're right, that 60-day listening tour, let me be very explicit. That doesn't mean that for 60 days I'm gonna do just that, nothing else. I understand, given the timing of this transition process, that anyone who's selected is gonna have to come on board and be ready day one to start making decisions and moving. And so what I would also invest in, that I mentioned here, that environmental scan, investing the time and energy with the top leadership and administration of school districts for them to help keep together a grasp of what is going on, what are the areas that we need to shore up immediately, what are the areas that can't wait, what are the areas we can put out 2 months, 3 months. And so there has to be an effort, I think, to prioritize and to make determinations about here's what comes first and here's why. This has to be settled. There are going to be some things that are not going to be, they're going to happen simultaneously. So I would be very prescriptive about how I would approach trying to organize and getting things off the ground. The looking, listening, and learning tool, on the other hand, would be something that would take place pretty informal over time. But the emphasis would be, of course, on making certain that our schools are ready to open, students are ready to be served, and that we're supporting staff so they can do a great job of supporting students on day one.
Mr. Marsden.
Okay, Dr. Lawrence, I'm gonna stick with my same question. We think we have 5 great candidates. How can you convince us that you are the person for this job, the best person for this job?
One thing I've always been very careful about is saying or doing anything that would leave someone with the impression that I'm overconfident, or that I'm cocky, or that I'm arrogant. Whenever anything like that begins to raise itself in my mind, I remember that you are the longshoreman, you're the refinery laborer. It takes a refinery in Port Arthur. So here's what I would do. I think the information that I presented 2 years ago was fairly compelling. I think anyone who knows anything about leadership knows that I made a really compelling case 2 years ago, that I was the only person at the table who'd been a superintendent previously, and that I invested heavily in making certain that I was over-prepared to do this job. And I would say that if I have not made that case so far, then it's probably gonna be impossible for me to make it. When you start thinking about, I could go into a garden variety level, education doctorate, I could've gotten an education doctorate, I was one at Birmingham, where I went to undergraduate school. But what I think sets me apart is the intentional investment I made in selecting and gaining admission to, participating in, and graduating from the top superintendent preparation program in the country. I felt that had the network, the history of that program in terms of the leaders, and not only in Texas, but many have come to Louisiana, many have gone all over the country. That investment, I think, signals how serious I am about leadership, that I want to make sure I am over-prepared. I think likewise, when you look at the fact that I have had all of the formative types of professional experiences that lend themselves to success in a superintendency, I don't know how to better state it than how I stated it this evening. I think you read the packet, I think you look at my resume, and I think what you do is you line those resumes up, line 5 resumes up, and say, if I had to bet which one of these candidates is best prepared to bring leadership at a high level, which one would it be? And again, not to be overconfident, but I have invested to make sure I can separate myself from the pack. And I think I have done that.
Mr. Baumgartner.
Yeah, since Reverend Wallace took my question about strength builders, which you answered very good, I'm gonna go back to a question I asked earlier. As the spouse of a first grade teacher at Gillis Elementary, which is in our school district, I'd really like to know your vision or thoughts on early childhood education before kindergarten and how they're going to be prepared when they get to the lower levels of the elementary school system.
You have no idea how much I appreciate your question. That's one that I should be able to put over the fence. So, when you look at what's going on, particularly, and I don't know what your wife's school looks like in terms of socioeconomic status, poverty, those things. But long story short, the students who come to school in this country, least prepared to do well on day one, and more often than not, they come from backgrounds of poverty. They come from backgrounds of lack. And these students do not have the wherewithal. I have a process that I refer to as academic triage. Academic triage means we aggressively identify those students who come to school, kindergarten, pre-kindergarten. We can see that the student is not where they need to be socially, they are not where they need to be academically, they don't know any of their letters, and you have to intentionally invest in building the skills of those students. Because here's what I believe, that although we're talking about early childhood education, if we do not do our due diligence with those students, when they first come to us, that by the time they get to 3rd grade, most of those students, you start seeing a diminishing of those skills. And if you've not gotten to where they need to be by 3rd grade, unless you're willing to continue to invest intensive assessments, resources and supports, those are the students who you have to worry about dropping out. But absolutely, that's where we have to put our attention. That would be one of the top areas of focus that I would have for the superintendent, is making sure that those students are equipped with the skills they need to be able to succeed academically and socially at a high level. Because you can't stop with academics. There's no way you can. Because students don't know how to get along with their peers, if they don't know how to keep their hands to themselves, if they don't know how to, get along with the playground, those challenges are going to only intensify as the student gets older. And so, thank you for that question. Great question.
Ms. Pichon.
Thank you. So, Dr. Lawrence, we got a lot of great programs going here, like we got a lot of great programs going on in our parish with like Educators Rising, which helps our pipeline bringing people and everything like some of what you're speaking of. But what would you say, I know you did some research, besides teacher pay and everything like that, was the biggest strengths you saw of ours and the biggest weaknesses?
So I wanna make sure I'm grasping your question accurately. So you're saying what I see as the greatest strengths and the greatest weaknesses?
Correct.
Okay. I think that when you start looking at the financial reporting and the intentional investment that has been made to make certain that the finances, the fiscal area, the budgetary area of the district is not only shored up, but the reporting is A+ level. To have that many consecutive years of superior performance, that automatically distinguishes itself as the area of greatest strength. I think the area where we really need to make some intentional investments has to be students in schools that are underperforming. We have to try to find a way to, and there's no panacea, there's no silver bullet. The only way that work can be done is very painstakingly, and it has to be done in a way that is going to allow teachers to not come to the conclusion that we're not being supported. Because teachers almost feel that a spotlight is being placed on them. My kids are not performing at this level. We point to the teacher. The system, I'm talking about the state, unfortunately, points to schools. And they label schools, and they put an F on the school, and everyone wants to say, oh, that's a horrible principal. Those are horrible teachers. That's a horrible school. The area that clearly is the area where we have our greatest need is trying to find how we can address schools that are underperforming in such a way that we can systemically, in a systems way, turn that performance around and continue supporting teachers and principals in the process.
Ms. Gay?
Dr. Lawrence, I'm going to ask two questions, but they kind of mesh together. One is, what is the difference between, in your opinion, board goals and district goals, or are they the same? And the other one is, what is your philosophy on delegating authority? How do you then maintain accountability as the superintendent?
Two very good questions. So I've always, as a former superintendent, viewed board goals as the goals that are collaboratively developed by this body corporate, as one unitary body to say, here are the goals that we have determined that we expect you as our superintendent of schools to address, and to try to develop a plan to not only speak to these goals, but we need to have a way of measuring your progress toward these goals. And in the event we don't feel that that progress is adequate, then we need to find a way to not only have a conversation, but we have to come up with a plan to try to change that trajectory in such a way that it reflects what the board thinks is acceptable. And so I see board goals as apart from district goals, because district goals, on the other hand, hopefully there will be some alignment between the board goals and the goals that we as a cabinet, as a group, determine, and so I see that as two separate parts. In some ways, they can be the same, but in other ways, and I'll give you a very good example. If the board determines that we want you to make sure that you are holding principals accountable, well, that's a good goal. It's somewhat vague, and it's also open to a lot of interpretation. And so I would hope goals that would be really well defined and not so vague, that don't need a lot of interpretation, to make certain that I'm on point with what you expect as my bosses. Because, so that's how I see board goals. District goals, again, on the other hand, I see as we're in cabinet, I'm with the chief academic officer, and all of the folks that are a part of that team, these are the folks who directly work with schools and support schools, who support teaching and learning. And we need to make sure that as it relates to the requirements of the state accountability expectations, that we'll be responsive not only to the goals that you've established, but also that we'll be responsive to the needs that come from the state, that we have to be accountable to these particular expectations. And so, in some instances, I can see the two as being married, and in some instances, I can see the two as being separate as well. And I hope I answered that question. That second question, I wish my secretary.
It was, what is your philosophy on delegating authority, and how do you then maintain accountability?
So it makes me think back to my first superintendency. It was a very rough type of setting. And the board president told me he was disappointed in me because no one's afraid of you. He said, no one's afraid of you. Your predecessor, everyone's afraid of him. And no disrespect, I said that's not something I desire. That's not something that I value. I'm hoping folks are not afraid of me. I'd much rather be respected. And so I delegate authority in this way. If you're selected to fill a certain role, let's say you're the chief operations officer, under your umbrella exists all these different expectations, all these departments, divisions. Then I think as your supervisor, I should be able to trust you to do your work the same way that the board trusts me to lead the district. In other words, the last thing, I've never been called a micromanager because that's just not who I am. If a person's not performing well, I think we do our very best to have a conversation and explain in very concrete terms why. And what we can do, of course, we're going to rely on them to come back with A, B, and C, how they should address where they're falling short. But to the extent that I have to be hands-on in management, that's really never been my style. The folks who report to me now and the folks who have reported to me throughout my career have always said, you're the nicest boss we ever had. And even though I appreciate that, that's never been my goal, to be a nice boss. My goal is to be an effective boss. And my goal is to be able to say we achieve unparalleled outcomes that have never been experienced by this system before. And so I delegate, I think, very carefully. I make sure that I'm very deliberate in how I delegate and to whom I delegate what. I try to observe that certain people have strengths, and with other folks, these may not necessarily be his or her strengths. And I try to make sure that the expectations that I give them are aligned with, if I may, their strengths.
All right. That's it. We're out of time. We have to go into a maximum 30 minutes executive session. Do I have a motion to go to executive session? Somebody, Dr. Washington motion. Who was the second? Mr. Pishon?